Well, hello everyone. Darren Saul, episode 177 of Playing with Perspective, the suspended animation podcast, coming up to Christmas, New Year. Hopefully everybody's doing fantastically well. We've got a couple more shows before the end of the year, but today we have a fantastic guest, Danny Ruspandini. Is that how I pronounce your name, Danny?
That's correct.
Ruspandini's here, and we're going to chat about how to rebrand your organization the environmentally sustainable way. So welcome to the show, Danny.
Thank you, Darren.
And now, I mean, it's fascinating to me because as I mentioned to you earlier, I've never really met a rebranding specialist and then an environmentally friendly rebranding specialist. Now we're really getting niche.
Interesting combo. Yeah, I haven't met a rebranding specialist either, so or a rebranding advisor anyway. So
yeah, really looking forward to getting into it. But I thought before I do, I'd just give everybody a little rundown into your background. So Danny is a rebranding advisor and the founder of Impact Labs Australia. They guide Australian organisations through complex rebrands while ensuring they remain environmentally responsible along the way. So Danny, let's get into it. Tell us a bit about, how you got into this and, why you're so passionate about it, because I'd love to, hear the story.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So I guess a couple of paths have brought me here. Having a background in marketing, design, advertising, I've always sort of had that, that interest in brand development and just sort of, I've always had this sort of, this passion for knowing, how people start their businesses, why the business exists, what the driver is for making it, making it happen in the first place. It's just one of those things that's very interesting to me. And that's, in my life as a creative, I've kind of seen a lot of marketing material and a lot of brand development stuff that we would, printed material and that kind of thing. And I've seen a lot of waste come out the other side of that. So I guess, I just got a bit frustrated seeing how much waste is actually created in the creative process and in marketing. So I guess those two worlds sort of coming together has led me here.
Into there. And, it's always like rebranding can be such an arduous task to think about, oh my God, I've got to rebrand, and as we've discussed before, you think that you only have to do A and B, but you really have to do A, B, C, D, and E. And then it becomes even more arduous. And you think, oh my God, why did I even start this in the first place?
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot to do.
Yeah. And that's right. Like that's 100% right. Because I mean, often with a rebrand, you kind of think it's very surface level. You're probably looking at your website, you're looking at your logo and other things and thinking, okay, I just got to give that a bit of an update and we're good to go.
Yep.
And what often happens, and this doesn't matter if you're a solo company or if you're a multinational, the deeper you get into a rebrand, the bigger you realize it is. And it can be, the word people use very often is painful. It can just be a very painful process.
Yeah.
And it often goes so much longer than you expect it to.
Yeah. And especially these days, because you're not only talking about print anymore, you've got digital, you've got web content, you've got blogs, you've got podcasts, you've got YouTube. I mean, there's so much more, there's so many more platforms for you to show up on. So you've got to make sure that you're consistent across all those platforms, which makes it even more extensive. So, man, but I mean, let's take a step back and kind of, I'd love for the audience to really explore with us. When might a company be ready for a rebrand? How do you know you're ready for a rebrand?
Yeah. It's a really important question. So typically we work with companies where the owner, the business leader, is, might be the owner or might be a new CEO, and they're very connected to the company still. So often their own values tend to drive the values that they input into the company.
Yep.
And something just starts not quite feeling right anymore. Mm-hmm. Especially, being sustainable, being green is a very hot topic at the moment, but it's definitely not a new thing. But it's heavily in the media. You'll see sustainability pages and impact pages popping up on websites that you may not have expected before. So something inside that leader, or possibly even the team at large, is just starting to change. It's just starting to feel a little bit different, not quite sitting right. Might not necessarily be that sustainability angle. It might be that, your services are changing a little bit. It might be that you've got a new service or a new product that's coming out that you're really excited about, but maybe it doesn't quite fit with what the company's been doing up until that point.
Yep.
So you just sort of get this sense that that something's not quite right anymore and something needs to change. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people just sort of decide that they have to throw everything out that they've built to that point and say, we need to rebrand, we need to change the company. And that's kind of when the pain starts, because there are many alternatives to doing a full rebrand like that. So that's part of what Impact Labs is hoping to do, where we talk about alternatives a lot.
Yeah, fascinating. And I was actually going to ask you, I mean, are there any, the obviously alternative to not rebranding is, or to rebranding is to not rebrand, but
yes, that is often an alternative. Yep.
But I love the way you mentioned that there's also like a hybrid model, that sometimes you can use what you already have and rebrand to a point, incorporating what you already have, which is fascinating.
Yes. There are a few alternatives that we talk about at a sort of a high level. And then there are dozens of alternatives really. But a few we talk about, one is a copy rebrand. So this is basically, not changing anything visually necessarily. But you can do some work on maybe rewriting something like your values. We all talk about our vision, our mission, and our values.
Yep.
And that can, I know that can sound a little bit like, fluffy branding speak, but if your values are something that really drives your company and your own business, then having a look at those can be a sort of a nice shortcut to, it's not necessarily a rebrand, but it does help you change direction a little bit without having to throw everything out that you've built to that point.
It's just a little tweak.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a messaging tweak. It's something that, if you're the kind of person who likes to put messages on the wall, that's the kind of thing you can put on your wall. It's what you can put on your website and other marketing, so that, your customers can see that your direction has changed a little bit, or maybe it's become a little bit more focused. So a copy rebrand is a nice one. And, sort of a hot tip there is that regardless of what path you end up taking, even if it is a complete rebrand, often you'll start with your copy anyway. So that's sort of doing step one, and often that's enough.
Yep.
Another alternative we sometimes talk about too is a brand extension. So you don't necessarily change anything about your brand, your company brand, but you add to it. So you don't have to throw anything out, you actually add. So if you add new products or new services, you can create branding, logos, that kind of thing for your new service, sell it as a different product, and nothing needs to change with your core company. So there are just a few. There's several more that we talk about. I love that.
I think it's fascinating. And like rebranding can be a journey. It doesn't have to be. It has to be done within 2 months and everything's rebranded. It can be a journey over 5 years. But I suppose you have to have a very good roadmap and a good understanding of what you're doing and where you want to go.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that last point that you made is something that we try and talk about a lot. Is often people will jump into a rebrand a little bit hasty. They get this itch that they need to do this now that they realize that something needs to change. They need to do it as quickly as possible. And obviously, you kind of want to do it as quickly as possible. But we talk about making sure you have a clear end goal in mind. Rather than just sort of diving in and saying, all right, let's just let's update the website and figure it out as we go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's where your pain will really start, because as you mentioned before, there are all those platforms and, digital accounts that you probably signed up to, even our accounting and all that kind of stuff is all in the cloud now. So if you're sending invoices with old logos, and
oh my God,
it's create a world of pain. So having a really clear end goal, one of our first steps when we walk clients through this is taking an inventory. And that can be a several week process. And that's going through all those accounts that you mentioned.
Wow.
Asking everyone in the company to contribute to that inventory. and then actually, creating a really clear and solid rollout plan that's very realistic for everyone's workloads. And you kind of, you get a sense of how long it may actually take you just by doing simple exercises like that.
Wow. Do you have a particular, roadmap or template for how you go about the rebranding process? Like, do you always say, let's start with all your copy, then we'll start with all your graphic and video material, then we'll start with your, extensions like MYOB and your logo and your signature and your email and all that kind of stuff? Do you have any particular process that you follow? I'd love to, to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, we do. And it depends on that path that they end up going down, whether it's just a copy rebrand, whether it's a brand extension or something bigger. But yeah, as I said, one of the first steps is taking an inventory. So that's something that anyone can do, big Excel spreadsheet, stick it on Google Docs and share it with everyone in the company and just spend a few weeks going, yep, I just logged into this, that needs to change. I just logged into this one, that needs to change. Take notes of things on the desk around the office. There'll be vehicles in the car park with stuff on it.
Yep.
And actually, just to sort of tangent off that a little bit, coming back to being sustainably conscious. We work with some suppliers, and there are plenty of suppliers that you can sort of search around. They're really coming to the table with this. We talk about the end of life of anything that you currently own, marketing wise, material. Think about merchandise, sure. Training material, any documents that you print, all that kind of stuff that hopefully it's recyclable when you rebrand, because all that stuff just gets thrown out, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, a lot of suppliers,
and that's a really good point. There's a lot of wastage in a lot of this stuff, isn't there?
Totally. Yeah. So a lot of suppliers will actually help you think about what the end of life will be for some of that material that's slightly more disposable. Yep. So that can be a big process in itself if you really do want to take this seriously and take sustainability seriously. That can be a big process to try and find the right partners to work with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I've got so many thank you forms and letterhead forms here. Yeah. It's taken me a lifetime to get through them all. Because when you order them, they say, order 100, 500 or 1,000 or whatever. It's
yeah.
Like, oh, yeah.
Yep.
Just order 1,000. It's not that much more expensive, but then you never use it.
Yep. Right. That's right. Yeah, just on that, there's a new, well, not new, it's not new. There's a service called print on demand that a lot of companies are starting to embrace. And I think it's becoming more accessible and more affordable as well. So, explore those options as well, because it's sort of more of a made to order kind of thing rather than a minimum of 1,000.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So there are options there too. Yep.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know there's probably a lot of people thinking now as well, if we take it right back to the strategy level and think, all right, like, what am I going to do? How do I go about my brand? Is it going to be a personal brand, or is it going to be a company brand? Is it going to be a personal logo? Are they going to see me, or are they going to see a more generic logo? Any thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit more of a, that sort of comes back to the fundamental shaping of your business, which I guess the companies that we've worked with have already done some of that thinking.
Yep.
But it can certainly form part of this discovery of, if something's changing and you're rebranding. We haven't worked with anyone who's done this, but there is a model, I guess, where the business leader steps back from the sort of the invisible person behind the company and steps forward into the spotlight and becomes the brand. Yep. Yeah, as I said, we personally haven't worked with anyone like that, but that's definitely a consideration. And if you're sort of starting to become maybe somewhat of an expert in your own field, that could be an alternative as well. Another rebranding alternative that we talk about, where your company stays exactly as it is, you remain the owner or not, and you step into the spotlight as a separate brand. So yeah,
I like that. I mean, I think that's kind of happening a lot. I agree. I think a lot of the time now we're moving towards the personal brand side of things. We're moving towards building relationships and building trust with someone tangible rather than just a generic logo. So we want to know who the person is behind the brand. And I think that's happening more and more, that, you know, the founder of the company or the, you know, the key players are moving forward and becoming part of that branding exercise.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
And even to the point where, you know, you might have an agency where you have 5 or 10 consultants working for you. They can each have a small mini personal brand under the large brand as well.
100%. Yeah.
So there's so many totally branding opportunities, and, you know, I suppose that's where your hybrid model can come into it as well. It's kind of they're extensions of your existing brand.
That's right. And I guess the point you're making is a really good one, because, you know, the thinking here is that whatever your company does, it doesn't need to be, you know, there's not one size fits all products in your company or all services. There are ways to give legs to new services, new products, or new personal brands that don't affect what you've built to that point. Because, you know, some of these companies that we've worked with, they've been in business 20 years, 30 years. One legal firm has been in business, you know, the grandfather started it. So it's, or even the great grandfather, I think. So it was well over 100-year-old company. And they're considering throwing everything out and starting again. And, you know, that could be the right path for them. We haven't come to a decision there yet, but it's a lot of history to throw out, you know. So there are plenty of considerations there.
And not to mention, you know, copyright of logos and trademarks and all that kind of stuff they might have acquired over the years as well.
There's a great story out of the US. If you've heard of MailChimp, there's this alternative company called ConvertKit. They're like a competitor. Oh, yeah. And the founder of ConvertKit, his name is Nathan Barry. He's very publicly written about when they attempted a rebrand and completely failed with it. They basically tried to change the name because they felt like they'd outgrown the name ConvertKit, which was you know, something that he started at home, and they grew to several $1 million and wanted to change with it, and made a big mistake, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a new domain name through a big negotiation. And they just had to reverse and go back to ConvertKit because they just missed the mark completely. Basically, I think the message in that whole story is that they came to the decision to change the name of the company behind closed doors. They've got a very big audience, and they didn't engage the audience at all. And it was basically the audience that told them that they made a mistake. Oh, boy. And they had to admit it, and they had to undo everything. And, you know, very, very expensive mistake, but he's very open about the journey. So that's a really interesting article to read.
Wow, fascinating. And, you know, that's a really good point you made. Like, you know, engage with your audience, get some feedback before you do anything.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, ideas first. Maybe call a bit of a strategy session with some, you know, some key followers or key audience members, and see what, you know, what they come back with.
One of the conversations we often have is that, you know, because as we've said, people are tied to their company. People are very attached to their companies. You know, business leaders and founders are very attached to their companies, and they've their own values, and a lot of them is in it. But what we often have to remind them is, and this isn't my thinking. This is someone much smarter than me has come up with this thinking, and we just remind our clients of it. Is that your company is not for you. You're not your company's client.
Yeah.
You are not your customer. Your customers are your customers.
So true.
And rebranding is it's definitely something you want to bring your customers along with. You don't want to keep it. It's not like the motor show where you reveal the new model that year. You know, you don't want to keep it under wraps. Right. You really want to bring them along on the journey, and you know, make them feel part of what you're creating, because they are. You know, they're going to shape your business. So
yeah, and that's a great opportunity to get buy-in and get them involved in your journey, and that's a great story to tell on social media and in marketing.
Yeah,
you know, that creates your tribe and your journey further through that process. So I think that's a really
people
great
engage
idea.
with that. Like, people really, really do come along with it, especially if they like the direction that you're going in.
People want to be part of something these days. They want to go on their journey with you. It's not about, here we go, done. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Tell me your thoughts.
And you made a really good point. Like, is the rebrand for you or is the rebrand for your customer? Why are you rebranding in the first place? That's a
right.
really, really important point.
Yeah, it's part of the vision setting. So you will come up, you will have that feeling yourself that something needs to change. That'll happen by yourself. It may come from feedback from customers, but you will kind of start that process. As a business leader, you'll say, okay, I think we need to explore this. And you go on an exploration and, you start with your team, you bring in a few customers, you bring in a few advisors. It's not that you have to publicly broadcast every step of the way on Instagram, unless you're that kind of personality, then by all means. But the important thing is not to try and do it on your own in a closed room without any feedback.
Yeah, perfect. Love it.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's where you come in. But before we get into that, I just want to chat a bit about, now I'm assuming you're wearing your green t-shirt to be environmentally friendly, or is that a
totally by accident? But
well done, well done. But
Thank
let's
you.
talk more about the environmentally friendly side. I mean, obviously we touched on that, on the fact that there's a lot of waste with print material, but maybe let's expand on that. Are there any other areas within that environmental and sustainability concept for branding?
There are. One of the ways that we're still exploring ourselves is there are suppliers that will, so basically digital products can help in this area. So, we all talk about a carbon footprint, which has become a bit of a buzzword, and people are sort of getting a bit deaf to these these terms that sound like, like someone's trying to pull the wool over our eyes a little bit. But there are some interesting stats on the internet, and sorry, not on the internet, through actual real research. There's some stats about how much energy is used, to power the internet. There's plenty of information about, how much energy goes into powering Bitcoin and those kind of tools. So there are suppliers who, like for your website, like your hosting provider, there are green suppliers in that space. So green tech is a thing.
Nice.
If you're building websites or apps, there are servers that run on renewable energy that use minimal resources, and they do actually bring down the footprint of your digital presence. And there are tools to measure. You can actually measure the carbon footprint of a single web page.
Wow.
This is one of the drivers behind dark mode. If you've come across dark mode everywhere, the theory is just that switching to dark, burns less energy, and these are sort of micro adjustments you can make, but everything's contributing, right? So we've, as a company, we've moved all our digital products onto green servers, and we also sort of help our customers with finding alternatives, not just to rebranding, but to marketing material in general. So we've started developing a product that is digital annual reports. So our customers, are not-for-profits, national organizations, and they produce annual reports every year that are often printed. And I think by law, there are some components that need to be printed and posted to certain people. But the majority of those documents, they can be hundreds of pages and often sit in boxes in a warehouse.
Absolutely.
They might get 500 copies printed, 50 people get a copy, and the rest of them sit there until next year when they have to renew the annual report and throw all those ones out. So there are digital alternatives to that. There are digital alternatives to a lot of marketing materials. So that's another angle that we guide people through.
Yeah, great.
So there's
about it. E-signatures must have saved a lot of wastage alone, just the digital signature.
Yeah. Assuming where the signature is going is accepted that way, because I've hit a couple of walls with that, which is unfortunate. Yeah, where they don't accept a digital signature, they still want you to print it and take a photo. So you'll still hit barriers, but there are alternatives coming up everywhere, and
fascinating. Yeah, so definitely. So obviously there's sustainable strategy in actually just stopping, printing too much content, or possibly using alternative content that's not physical, that's more digital, but also going to suppliers and platforms that are sustainably, environmentally conscious.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, we're really touching just on marketing material, what you and I have been talking about here, but a lot of this comes back to, fundamental business values. There's sustainability is, like we said, the terms being thrown around that people are probably starting to get a little bit deaf to.
Yeah.
But we have to realize that this isn't a fad. Like, this is an important step that a lot of companies need to make. And if we talk about sport or music, there are fundamentals that you have to learn before you'll get good at those things.
Definitely.
And sustainable thinking is one of those fundamentals that we really need to build into the core of our businesses if we're going to ensure that they survive and just do the right thing by our customers. And I think about my kid, I think about the future, and that's one of the big drivers of trying to help make this change with the organizations we come across.
Love it. I think it's fantastic. And something else that just popped into my head while we're talking is that, even the process of thinking about being environmentally friendly in your rebranding strategy might actually lead to incredible creativity, because you might think, I don't want to do that because I don't want to have any printed material. What else can I do? And that might lead you down a whole other strategy of putting together all sorts of incredible video and audio and podcast content.
100%.
It's a creative outlet or a creative opportunity to start thinking much more wider in terms of your content strategy, and not always thinking about what can I print, what can I make to print, what can I,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And it's like, it gets you thinking lean as well, not sort of thinking in excess.
Yeah.
That's a really good point that you make.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So Danny, I'd love to hear more about how you actually work, because as I mentioned, I've never met a rebranding specialist in my life. So it's fascinating. So if a company wants to rebrand, they come to you, and maybe just walk us through what you do and how you do it. And, do you have a team that works with you, and how does it all work?
Yeah. Essentially we run a workshop. So if you're sort of getting this feeling, this itch that something needs to change, we'll have a quick chat with you, and we think, if we think there's or if collectively you and I think that something is needing further exploration, book in a workshop with us, and we'll spend a few hours over a few sessions if we need to, and we'll go through, we'll help you figure out what that vision is, what the end goal is.
Nice.
We'll go through several alternatives that you can consider, considering who your team is as well. So just one point I'll make too, we help you figure out this vision and set the process up, and then as much as possible we also help you figure out if your team can actually take on that workload, or if you need to go and source suppliers and third-party suppliers to help you through it. Nice. And then we'll refer you out. So we don't actually help with the actual changing of the brand, the design, or anything like that.
Right.
So we kind of guide you down the right path, and sort of not let you figure it out on your own. We're always there to help, but it's very much your project from there on. But so we help you figure out those alternatives, and it's kind of a big discovery process that at the other end of it, you basically get a roadmap for how your rebrand could go. It's doing that inventory, it's finding those suppliers. And like, our big aim is that you actually successfully get to the end of whatever your rebranding path is, because that's a surprisingly rare outcome. So many companies start off down a rebranding path, and there's several reasons they just don't get there. They realize how big it is, like we were saying earlier. They realize they haven't thought about the end goal, and they're actually not on the right path, so they bail out of it. It drags on, it takes too long for various reasons, or like I've explained with ConvertKit, they get there, they launch, and they realize it was the wrong thing, and they have to revert. Yeah. So it's really unpacking all of that, avoiding all of those kind of things, making sure that you take the right path, you actually get to the end of it, and get back to business. Because another goal with us is that we don't want to, we're a rebranding. A rebranding is a project that should start and finish in our mind. Yeah. So we kind of want you to be done with us as soon as possible. We want you in, out, and getting on with running your business.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So do you get involved in the project management of that whole process, or not really?
As a general, I mean, mostly we don't. Mostly we set that early vision. But we have a couple of clients who we are there. So we're sort of on call for them.
Sure.
For advice, because they have gone and found their own suppliers, and we'll often jump into roundtables once a month or something like that. Just sort of make sure that vision's still clear. Help them keep the ship steered straight.
Yep.
As far as project management, not necessarily. No. There are people who can do that much better than we can.
Awesome. And do you work in any particular niche, or do you have any favorite niches or areas that you like to work in, or you'll help a customer rebrand in any area?
It really depends on the vision. So yeah, we'll talk to anyone. We're happy to talk to anyone who's considering this, from a solo founder to our sweet spot is a multi-location Australian organization. So something like a charity with an office in every capital city, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And we exclusively work with Australian companies as well. So we don't work with overseas companies. We just think there's a different culture overseas, and we don't want to try and speak someone else's language, really.
That makes sense.
Emotional language, not necessarily English.
Yeah.
So yeah, we stick with Australian companies. And there are challenges the bigger the company gets, and there are also sort of management consultants start to come in when the company is a little bit bigger, a little bit out of our realm.
I'd say that and change direction a little.
Yeah, and the decisions get bigger and they get a bit longer. You've got directors and boards and things like that to consider. So yeah, we'll definitely happy to talk to anyone, because we feel like just that discovery conversation is it's a critical first step that should be had, and it's one that you may not necessarily get to have if you embark down a path and go straight to your marketing team or your creative team and say, we need to rebrand. It might be a case of, everyone just gets started and starts doing work before too much consideration is given to the end result. So
I would say the majority of people would do exactly that. They say, time to rebrand. What are we going to do? Let's get a new logo.
Yeah, I think that's where that painful word comes from.
Change our email address. Let's change our colors. Let's get a printer. Yes. Let's get a graphic designer. Let's go. And then you realize, So I think what you mentioned, really going through that strategy and preparation phase at the beginning to come in with a checklist and do an inventory and really work out what you need to do, what alternatives there are, what ways of doing things there might be available to you. I think that's a absolutely imperative part of the process these days.
Yeah, and it's fairly general. It can apply. We've used it for technology software companies. We've used it for insurance companies. Used it for a bank. We used it for solo and husband and wife companies. It does help. It does bring just that little smidge of clarity that you need to take. We call ourselves step 0.5. So you can go and take step 1.
Okay. And what do you do if you have two people that are decision makers that are right in the middle and they can't seem to agree?
They can't agree. I dig into my bag of every tool I can think of to keep people. Yeah, no, that's a tricky situation. I guess in that case, I can't speak. I haven't had that yet, or not to a painful degree anyway. But I guess that comes back to reminding them that it's about their customers. It's not about them. I imagine anything that they don't agree on, possibly driven by a personal belief. So yeah, it's just a matter of trying to guide them through that kind of thinking.
Yeah, I think that is really, 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 really incredible. Very, very clever. I think that's so true, because a lot of the time, rebranding is based on ego. It's based on what we think we should do, how we perceive ourselves with what we're doing, how we perceive ourselves in the marketplace. So I think focusing back on the customer can change that whole perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done. Well, Danny, really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been absolutely fascinating. I mean, I never realized there was so much into rebranding. So anytime I'm ever going to do any rebranding, I need that checklist.
Yeah, definitely give it some thinking beforehand.
Absolutely. But just want to give you an opportunity to tell the audience how they can find you.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So impactlabs.com.au is where everything's at. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do a lot of social stuff, but yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. And if you go to impactlabs.com.au/rebrand, there's a document there that you can download that talks you through, some of the alternatives that we've talked about here. Completely free, and help yourself.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes, because that'll be a very, very useful link. And I always like to leave my guest with the last few words. So any little tips or takeaways, any quick little tricks that you might be able to give to somebody that's thinking about rebranding? Yeah,
it's a good question, actually. The very first thing I would say is just take a step back. Don't rush. Have a chat with at least one other person. Mm-hmm. Don't try and make this decision on your own in a closed space. It doesn't matter if you are a solopreneur. Cringe a little bit when I say that word. Just bounce it off one other person at least.
Yeah, I think that's very, very sound advice. Absolutely. Well, Danny, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks,
I wish you incredibly well. Hopefully you get really busy into next year. And I'm sure that you're looking forward to a bit of a downtime now towards the end of this year.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh.
We all are. But everyone out there, I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I have. Danny Ruspandini from Impact Labs Australia, and we'll see you very, very soon for another episode of Playing with Perspective. Bye for now.
Thanks, Darren.